Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. I'm Patrick, flying solo. Was that fun or what? The Warriors, they beat the New Orleans Pelicans 120-109 in, by my count, the 50th must-win game of the season for your Golden State Warriors. They were garbage in the first half, and all of a sudden things were looking really, really bleak, right? Like they had beaten the Sixers, they'd won 3 in a row, and then they just goofed and coughed up a game against the Timberwolves, who are right there with the Warriors, and then they were about to cough one up in a bad way to the Pelicans, who were also right there with the Warriors, but they cleaned it up in the second half. They just executed. They had 14 turnovers in the first half and only 4, I believe, in the second half. They showed what they, again, could be when they're focused and they're playing with intensity and they're doing the right things to win. You know what I mean? Steph was amazing in the second half, 14 for 25 overall in the game, 8 for 15 from 3, only 4 free throws, 3 for 4 from the line, 39 points, 8 boards, 8 assists, 3 steals. I mean, come on. Remember, that dude is 35 years old now. Jordan Poole, coming off of that bad ending for Minnesota. I mean, he played a good game against the Timberwolves, and he continued to play a good game here, especially, again, also in the second half. 29 minutes, 8 for 15 from the field, only 2 for 6 from 3, 3 for 4 from the line, 21 points plus 16, 5 boards, 2 assists. 5 boards, solid. There's not a ton to kind of glean in terms of this team and their individual play. We know who these guys are right now. We know what they can be. We also know what happens when they don't focus, when they don't play well, right? We know what Poole can be when he is trying to win instead of just trying to put on a show and have quote unquote Jordan Poole time. We know what Steph and Dre are like when they're locked in and not throwing terrible passes and paying attention to what's going on the court. It's just a question of doing it enough to see how far they can get in the postseason. You know what I mean? Like if they look like they did in the first half, they're going nowhere. If they look like they did in the second half, then they can make some decent noise, you know? And there have been a ton of games this season where you could say it's a microcosm of the season, right? Where they look good and then they look bad. Jekyll and Hyde from one quarter to the next, one half to the next. But at this point, as I've said for like the past month, it is literally scratching and clawing for every single dang win that they could get. For a while, after that 3-game winning streak, it would look like, okay, maybe they're finding something and it can be a little bit easier. But obviously these last 2 games, I mean, I've said this before too, like what is going to make this interesting is that there are a ton of teams that are also scratching and clawing for playoff positioning, right? To get into the play-in, to move out of the play-in and into the regular playoffs. And right now the Warriors, they are back in 6th. If they had lost this game, it would have been tough to climb out of the play-in, which would have honestly been kind of devastating considering where they had been, how we felt about this team over the weekend. But the whole point of the season now is to get into the regular playoffs, get to the 6th seed. That's it. You know, if that's against the Kings, awesome. That's the matchup I've talked about wanting to see the most. But when you look at the Pelicans, when you look at the Timberwolves, I mean, the Warriors, they're in 6th. And technically, you know, I would say they are in control of their destiny again, right? It's up to them to win as many games as possible, win out whatever, and secure that 6th spot or higher, whatever, just avoiding the play-in. But they have the same number of losses as the Minnesota Timberwolves right now. The Timberwolves just have played one less game than the Warriors. So right now the Warriors are 40 and 37, 12 games out, and the Wolves are in seventh place at 39 and 37. And hey, give credit to the Wolves, right? They beat the Warriors in San Francisco at Chase Center on the road. And then on a back-to-back, they beat the Kings in Sacramento. So they're obviously after it. And, they're going to keep coming after it. Looking at the remaining schedules, right? The Warriors. So they get San Antonio at home, then they go to Denver, then they get OKC at home, then they go to Sac, and then they go to Portland and end the season in Portland. So to me, there's two gimmies in that. There's the Spurs and there's the Blazers. They announced, the Blazers did, that Dame Lillard they're shutting him down for the season. Another year, another tank for the Blazers. But Denver, OKC, and Sacramento, those are going to be tough. Really, really tough. So if the Warriors go 2-3 in these final five, that's going to put them in a precarious position to fall back into the play-in potentially, right? Because again, they're tied in the loss column with Minnesota. Therefore, they just can't afford to have many more losses. If we look at the Timberwolves' remaining schedule, they play at Phoenix. They get the Lakers at home, Portland at home. They go to Brooklyn, they go to San Antonio, and then they get New Orleans at home. So they, of course, have 6 games as opposed to the Warriors 5. So Phoenix is going to be tough because Phoenix got KD back. So they're going to be trying to get him back into the fold. And also they're trying to really, really solidify their playoff position as well in the 4 slot. They definitely want home court if they can get it. And then the Lakers, always dangerous. The Blazers, again, they're done. Brooklyn, not as good as they were with KD and Kyrie, of course, but they're still in the playoff contention, right? They're in the East. I believe they're 6th right now. So they're not even in the play-in. So we'll see how that goes. And then they go to San Antonio, which also, just like the Warriors, that should be a gimme. And then they get New Orleans, these same Pelicans at home. And that's going to be a tough one too, because the Pelicans, the Pelicans are right there too behind the Warriors at 38 and 38 in the 8th spot. Okay. So they are a full game and a half behind the Warriors, but only 1 game behind in the loss column. So that being said, it's good to note that the Timberwolves, because of that win that the Warriors should have had, the Timberwolves have the tiebreaker with the Warriors. Okay. So if they end up with the same record, the Wolves move ahead of the Warriors. And if this was the case now, and this is how the seedings ended, then the Warriors would fall to 7th because of that tie. And then you look at the Pelicans, who are just 1 game, as I said, behind the Warriors in the loss column. So if that susses out and if they ended up tied with the Warriors, it's not really clear, right? If the Warriors had lost this game, then they would have lost a tiebreaker to the Pelicans. But like, you kind of have to look elsewhere to see where that tiebreaker is. I don't want it to come to that. You know what I mean? I want the Warriors to get past this. So if we're looking at these schedules, it's like the Pelicans, they go to Denver, they get the Clippers, they get the Kings at home, they get the Grizzlies at home, the Knicks at home, and then that final game at Minnesota. So I feel okay about the Pelicans because that is a tough schedule to end with. All those teams are good, quality, solid, and a lot of those teams are trying to still fortify their position in the postseason. So I don't worry so much about them, but it's the Timberwolves. You know what I mean? The Timberwolves, all it takes is for the Warriors to like give up 3 games, and that opens the door for the Wolves to just, the Wolves go 3-3. And if the Warriors go 2-3, then the Wolves are tied with them and they get the tiebreaker. So it's up to the Warriors, right? Like, it's not as clear cut and dry, not as like, this coasting feeling of like really ramping up for the postseason that we had hoped for, because of that Timberwolves loss. It just so happens that they lost to the Timberwolves, right? It could have been another team, but in that one game, it made it very, very interesting, way more interesting than I had actually wanted it to be at this point. But again, the Warriors, it's up to them. Can they win enough games? I think they can, but it's which team shows up. It's been Jekyll and Hyde all season long. And as soon as you think they figured it out, they show you that they haven't yet. And first and foremost, get into the regular playoffs, avoid the play-in. And then once you're past that, then it's like, can the Warriors bring that consistent effort enough in the playoffs? Teams have lapses, but the lapses that the Warriors have had in games this season, throughout the season, I've said this before and I'll say it again, all you need is a couple games where you just screw it up, where you lose focus and you cough up a lead. That'll cost you a couple games and a series. So first things first, get into the proper playoffs, avoid the play-in, and then deal with some of those things. Still no word on Andrew Wiggins. They really, really could have used him these last couple of games, but Steve Kerr said in a pregame presser that he's working out on his own, staying in shape. Hopefully, obviously, it's not the same as game shape, but at least it's something, and hopefully things work out with him, and hopefully he can, come back to the team eventually, sooner rather than later. Anyway, very, very entertaining game, at least the second half. The first half was kind of bogus, but it is what it is, and I will 100% take it. It's also crazy too, because sometimes it just feels like the Warriors forget that other teams are coming after them, that they forget that other teams aren't just going to get scared of them and just like take it. They feel like automatically they're going to win. And that was a flaw they had early in the season. And still, it's a flaw that they have now. It happened against the Timberwolves. Clearly, some of that came into play at the beginning of this Pelicans game. But, they hit enough shots. The fouls, even 18-18 with the Pelicans. But the Warriors, surprisingly, got to the line more, 16 for 22 as opposed to 13 for 14 for the Pelicans. And the Warriors actually shot well from three. So that's always huge, right? Because they depend on the three so much. 18 for 40, 45%, whereas the Pelicans were 12 for 27, also shot decently well. That's 44%. But that margin of error is going to be very, very slim from here on out. But I guess that's what makes it fun. All right, that's all I got.